So what are the advantages of using a framework? It can be adapted to meet the needs of the organization, but also it provides an authoritative reference. For example, we just saw NERC. We can be audited according to NERC. Have we met those requirements or not? So by having a framework, which is a consistent, repeatable model, we can provide authority and credibility that we are doing the right things in the right way and allow us to ensure that we have not missed something. So it's an authoritative reference for audit and compliance. The implementation of strategy is, of course, the implementation of governance. But how do I implement strategy? Through policy. Policy stating the intent of management. For example, the high-level policy of an organization should always have something that indicates that management will comply with all the laws, governance, for example. It'll set out the culture of the organization. What is our culture towards how do we deal with our customers, competitors, and so on? So policy is a very practical way to implement the theory of governance and strategy. We could say, therefore, that policy becomes the foundation. It's the foundation on which we build our information security strategy. Policy gives us the authority for the strategy and also helps set out some of the boundaries for behaviors. One of the areas we have to look at today is compliance with laws dealing especially with privacy. And this is where there's been a lot of misunderstanding, and partially because every different jurisdiction can write its own privacy laws. We see that in some countries they are federal laws, whereas in Europe it's very much actually really a regional requirement. All of the countries must follow this one set of regulations. That was the difference between the old Data Protection Directive. A directive was a guidance document, whereas the GDPR is a regulated requirement. Now, we see in other countries, it's actually something done, for example, at the state level. And this is where you can have a lot of difference between different countries with different regulations, and even within a country, different regulations from different states. But because GDPR is quite influential around the world, actually, and has become the foundation for privacy laws in many other countries. For example, many countries like Argentina, Israel, Canada, Singapore are considered to be compliant with GDPR because their local laws then are very closely aligned with the requirements of GDPR. The idea here is from GDPR that privacy is about lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. It places limitations on which data we collect. We have to say, why do we collect it? But also, it places on us requirements of how we process and store the information we collect. We must be transparent in what we do. We must be fair and lawful in what we do. We also should only collect the data we need. That is data minimization. It is unfortunately a habit in a number of organizations. They'll collect data that they don't really actually even need or require. Our data must be accurate where possible, kept up to date. And if we're not keeping accurate data, we'd really have to question why we're keeping it at all. We should have protection for data that includes not only how do we protect it as we store it, where do we store it? For example, it must be stored in a place that provides adequate legal protection for that data as well. And on top of that, we must deal with our data to protect the integrity and confidentiality of that data and our transactions with other individuals. There is one additional principle that we call it a bonus principle, and that is accountability. And that is one that says an organization is accountable for what it does, and individuals are accountable for what they do with the data. So this describes the core concepts of privacy from GDPR, the tenets, or we can say here, the basic steps of a privacy regulation. This comes from Article 5, Paragraph 1. A part of GDPR is the role of the data controller, and that is the data controller shall be responsible. They shall be responsible for and able to demonstrate compliance with Paragraph 1 accountability. So the controller is the individual or named position that has the responsibility, and not only the responsibility, but must be able to demonstrate how they have been compliant with these requirements and done the tasks they are responsible for. That is in Article 5, Paragraph 2. Another example of a law is the one dealing with finance, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. And it was written especially to deal with problems of misstatement of financial reports. So therefore, its official name, most of us call it SOX, but its official name is the Public Company Accounting Reform and Investor Protection Act of 2002. The reason being that many public companies that traded on a stock exchange filed financial reports that were very, very fictitious. And this allowed them maybe to manipulate share price and executive bonus programs. And so when this really broke, when the internet bubble burst and we realized that an awful lot of the data we were getting on annual reports was something developed as part of a fairy tale, they developed then Sarbanes-Oxley to address this rather serious problem of misstatement of earnings and so on. So Sarbanes-Oxley had this requirement now that the responsibility for accurate financial reporting came right back to the board of directors and the senior management team. It mandated that they had accountability legally if the financial reports were incorrect. That set up this idea now that the board was accountable, and they couldn't just say, well, what they were doing was on behalf of the company. No. If the financial reports were inaccurate, it was a personal liability, and that the board had to play a much more involved role through the use of an audit committee to ensure that the financial statements of the organization were correct.